Now, if somebody's wearing wardrobe clothing that doesn't apply, in my mind, that's like they don't know any better, and in a sense that should be brought to their attention. Because if you, like for instance, if the computer class jacket was being worn for something else, with something else, then that means the uniform it has been broken up. And therefore, if you wear the jacket and somebody goes to wear the pants, then they don't have anything to wear. They have an incomplete uniform. So in a sense, that has to be brought to the attention. If it's kind of hard to tell what is important and what isn't. But what you want to do is try to figure out what a person's motive was in doing what they didn't do. You follow that? Rather than to notice that they're making a mistake.
And if the degree is worth mentioning.
Right.
It's like you mentioned with the crumbs. In other words, to me, it means that we're trying to get to a step where it does two things. It makes the responsibility more on you as an individual, so that you will look for the little things that you should correct, so that little things don't have to be brought to your attention. That's part of it. The other part is that we would like to advance to where procedure helpers and all don't have to bring little things that could seem petty to your attention. Now, this will fail. This will be a mistake to give you this information if it means that, well, now I can be sloppier and nobody's going to say anything about it. Or now
if you are sloppy, it will be brought to our attention, right?
Yes, and what it's trying to do is to get you to a better degree of judgment, so that you can see, is this what an older member would feel was significant enough, even though if I take it letter of the law, I can see that I have a procedure to do this. But am I interpreting that procedure correctly, or am I just covering my bet by, just in case that was familiar touching, I'm sure the person would want it brought to their attention, and since we have instruction not to do it. Do you see what I'm saying? You want to grow up a little bit more so that you're involving judgment with it as to the degree and your observation. Letter of the law in our procedures never really works. You can see what, look what the Christians do to quoting literally this and that. The funny thing is, when you quote things literally, they can have dozens of interpretations. When you know, when you have a judgment about the circumstance and know more what would be right or wrong in that circumstance, on that particular one, all things considered, then you don't have all these variables that you would have if you were just trying to go by the letter. Do you follow that? So we're trying to help you have better judgment. We're trying to have you exercise a judgment of the circumstance and be less petty, or less just following a procedure because it popped into your mind that was the procedure without thinking, was that really what the procedure intended? Or am I just quoting the procedure at anything that's in a wide range ballpark of the procedure? You understand that? Okay. You want me to turn this off?
Okay. I don't understand that. It's really hard to.
Yes. We've been talking a couple of minutes about notes being written about individuals that are something that an individual maybe didn't do that it was procedure to do. And that led us to a discussion of who should write notes, who should instigate notes about certain individuals. The point we're getting at is if my vehicle ever has difficulty seeing another particular vehicle in a higher light, then I should not instigate notes regarding procedures that other individual is breaking. It's just, and the other side of that is you've got also to see individuals breaking procedures that your vehicle maybe does not ever want to see in the negative light. In other words, let's say that my vehicle likes someone, but the vehicle likes to work with another individual so much, and they seem so pleasant to be around and all. The vehicle has a tendency to overlook things about them that are not procedure. And I am making a very serious offense if I overlook things about someone that I like. Do you follow that? Just as serious offense as I am making if I don't overlook things about individuals that I don't find that pleasant to work with. And this is where we hate to see procedures used as a vehicle to find fault with other vehicles that your vehicle doesn't particularly care that much for at times, or doesn't find them that harmonious. So every single one of you should examine whether or not I'm conned either way. Am I conned with certain individuals to overlook things that should be brought to their attention? And do I expect them to also overlook those things about me? That maybe I'm talking out of turn, or I'm saying things I shouldn't say? Because we kind of have we know that we both mean well, so since we do, then it's okay, to talk this way, which it isn't. Okay? So question yourself whether or not you lean one way or the other. You should not be the one to instigate a note of 3 times breakage or criticism toward an individual that your vehicle finds difficult. Right? Nor should you overlook procedures that should be brought to individuals because your vehicle has a tendency to want to overlook things that might be unpleasant, or not unpleasant, but outside of procedure with other individuals.
Well, I would really like for them to begin to see the good things that the classmates do, rather than the things that are bad. Okay?
Yes, but this, excuse me, if you could learn to see more of the good things and put more weight on seeing the good things on the ones that your vehicle has difficulty in seeing good things, that's where you would be ahead. You don't need to apply any effort to see the good things in the one your vehicle already wants to see, only the good things, you see, because there you're blinded by that vehicle.
Well, we know we've told you. You've been doing what we've asked you to do. So now we're going to ask you to do something else. We're going to ask you to see the good things, because every one of you do many, many things that are good during the day. And we know it. And but somehow or another, when the procedure helpers bring to your attention something that is so petty, sometimes it boomerangs on you, and it makes you feel like I can't do anything right. And which we don't want that to happen. We want you to strive to follow procedure to the best that you can. If by chance something that is really severe comes up, and it happens more than 3 times, then we feel like it would be okay to turn it over to procedure helpers. But we want you all to use your judgment to see if it's really that important. Now, we want to see also how you stepped in and covered for somebody, in a sense. Especially somebody you don't get along too well with.
Now,
Or you don't
he's
think
not
it's right.
talking about covering up.
No.
He's talking about
Stepping in and helping that individual. If you are aware, let's use a circumstance where someone in the process of having to do a task, which would take them out of the lab, like let's say this task, and it takes them out of the lab, and they do have time to get a sub in the lab, and let's say that one of you are aware that that individual did not do that. Would there be any harm in you helping that person get a sub? No, there would not be any harm. Because in a sense you were aware that they didn't get a sub. So why not help that person?
Now, if you're going to practice this, you've got to remember that the important key is that you practice it with more weight with the individuals that your vehicle wouldn't normally tend to practice it with.
Now, do you go back later and tell that individual, I got a sub for you because you forgot to get a sub?
Yeah.
No, you don't do that. Because then you would be defeating the purpose. There are many times that Joe steps in for me. And there are many times that I step in for Joe. And I doubt if, I know the times that from his mouth, I know the times that he stepped in for me, and I hope it's the same for him. In other words, we have learned to work together, and we want you all to learn to work together where you can help each other and get rid of the notes that, in a sense, like Joe said, are almost digs. It's getting rid of something that you are
It's using a procedure to accomplish another end that isn't procedure at all.
It isn't always that case, so don't get us wrong, but we do know we can feel the note in our hand.
That's true.
The ones, and if you all are as sensitive as we think you're beginning to be, I think you know also when things aren't right with that note that is coming your way. So anyway, we don't want to spend all our time talking about this, but we do want you to work on it.
Sometimes I think you're all angels anyhow, and you really are. It's like you came down and you had to put on a suit of clothes, but they weren't fresh. They weren't fresh. You had to wear a suit of clothes to do a task in, and they probably all had BO. Okay. But maybe the suit that you chose had a BO that you got accustomed to and that you could overlook. And so the other suits that had similar BO, you didn't smell. So they weren't offensive to you. Do you see what I'm saying? But the ones who chose the suits who had a smell that was quite different from the smell of your suit, it was very offensive to you. You'd even by that time forgotten that you also picked one that had BO to it, because you're so accustomed to it, you can't smell it. And you see what an analogy that is? Because that's really the way you are in those vehicles. Now, there is so much goodness in your minds. There's so much wisdom and goodness in your mind before you took those vehicles, that we wanted to shine through more, and so that you don't see vehicles. Now, we're not talking about just seeing physical vehicles. You see what we're saying? Let's say that someone has a way of saying something. Isn't that still the vehicle? Or a tone of voice, or a way of twitching, or screwing their mouth, or something. Isn't that still the vehicle? If that's offensive to you, you're still seeing the vehicle. Just as much, now we've had this lesson a couple times in the last week or two, but you're still seeing the vehicle in the same way that you see other vehicles as a positive, having nothing offensive about them. Their mouth twists in about the same way your mouth twists, and their tone of their voice is about the same, and they have characteristics that are harmonious with yours, but yours are just as wrong because they're still human characteristics. They're still vehicular characteristics. If you could see that, now I meant it when we said, in the truest sense, that your minds are very, very good. You have learned all the conduct that it took to get you to be in the kingdom of heaven. You have gone through that. And there is nothing offensive about your mind. Not one characteristic offensive about your mind, or aggressive, or that anyone could find any fault with. Therefore, when you find fault, or have negative feelings, or see negative things, you're still seeing vehicles. You're still seeing vehicles. And letting the vehicle do the feeling and having the response. Now, we know that you don't do it all the time, but this is one of the awful things about occupying a living plant that is stronger at times and weaker at times. I've noticed, for example, that the vehicle that I'm wearing is stronger at times if I have had an experience that I might call a decent night's sleep. But I'll wake up and I have to work harder at getting the mind in to have better control of it. Even though I might initially say, oh, I'm finally got a decent night's sleep. But from past experience, I've learned that when I have lousy sleep, I can keep my vehicle under better control. It's tired. The vehicle's tired. It didn't get revived. The mind didn't recede so. Do you follow what we're saying? And when it gets a good sleep, it without my knowing it, before I even recognize it, I'll see certain characteristics come out that I know are purely vehicular characteristics. And so suddenly it dawns on me, got a good night's sleep. The vehicle got a good night's sleep. It's really feeling spiffy. You know, it's really acting like if I would let it, it would act in some of its old characteristics that I keep muted all the time, as long as it's kept in a weakened condition. So, the thing you want to grow at this point is to have the advantage of knowing how wonderful every one of your classmates are. In other words, don't make them fight so to communicate without a vehicle. Do you follow what we're saying? If you could see their mind, if you could take the higher side on what they say and how they say it, you would see their mind, unless they've just really slipped for the moment and let the vehicle take over. Do you see what we're saying? But if you would keep the vehicle, that rein so tight that we've been talking about, on the vehicle and never give it any freedom, there aren't 35 individuals anywhere that could possibly enjoy the company of others as well as you could. And I'm not talking about, that would be without question. That would be without exception. There wouldn't be except for so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. I really don't have any difficulty seeing the next level mind in so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. I only have difficulty seeing the next level mind in so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. Which means that I have not yet opened my next level eyes in regard to so-and-so and so-and-so. Doesn't mean anything's wrong with them. I guarantee you nothing is wrong. Nothing is wrong. Something's only wrong with my eyes if I find something there. So we want so badly for you to get a good grade on this test and to, as quickly as you can, get the vehicle so under control that only you will be seen. It would be almost like your vehicles don't even exist. It would just be like minds coming together and communicating, and minds doing tasks. That I wish your vehicles were all just silver cloth and all looked alike and all sounded alike. But that would you wouldn't have much task, would you? Do you see what we're saying? So your task is to get to that point. Your task is to get there, where that's all you see. You certainly don't see other things. And this is back to where he started, that you still, something would have to be pretty offensive, a pretty good mound of crumbs left pretty consistently, to the degree that I know that individual doesn't have any idea that something is just causing them to be blinded to it, and I know that they wouldn't want me to not bring it to their attention. Because I know that every single one of you want to do everything right? You don't want to have habits or ways that are outside of procedure or that are distasteful to members of the next level in any way. I know I don't. And it would really disappoint me if I thought that you were, if they were being overlooked. But the only way they're, it's like I had with T, just as T did with me as we began to awaken, we had to let each other know by our actions, not by our words, those don't count, but by our actions that we please don't ever let me do anything that seems to be unlike next level conduct. Please don't let me do it without knowing that I've done it. Do you see what I'm saying? Don't, if you can catch me being blinded at something, I would feel cheated if I don't know about it. But that doesn't mean that the T's not going to pick up a potato chip that I dropped on the floor and turned around and didn't see it. And I'll never hear about the fact that Now, if every time I leave the table I done pass my plate on the floor, I hope to goodness T would tell me about it, that there's something about the way I turn seems to knock that plate off every time. Do you see what I'm saying? But not to the degree that once in a while T would know that's not what I usually do. And so she'd pick up that chip or push my chair into the table or whatever little thing it is that is not my way. Do you see what I'm saying? And that's what we're getting at. Is that enough? Want to stop? We were talking a minute about certain genetic deficiencies that vehicles have, and we're trying to get it straightened out of what your task is with those genetic deficiencies or weaknesses or kinks, whether it's that, let's say an individual might have difficulty in clearly thinking out a picture before they express it, And so they have to, one, recognize that their vehicle does not have good circuitry in thinking out something before it expresses it. So it desires and starts to practice thinking it out clearly before expressing it. Then it has to desire and start to practice the clear expression of what it has clearly thought out. Now, whether or not, and if you do all that you can to correct it, then you have made an A+. Whether or not the vehicle has ever gotten to the point as a result of your effort to make a perfect picture perfectly expressed is unimportant. Because that depends upon how many generations that weakness has been there and how poorly developed that vehicle is. And you weren't sent and say, you've got X number of months to turn 10 generations around in that vehicle. Do you see what we're saying? But for the time that you're in that vehicle, your job is to recognize its less than next level development, its unhealthy ways, mentally, physically, everything. You recognize its shortcomings, its ways, its unhealthy ways, its primitive ways. And then your job is working with all your might against those primitive ways. Now, if you happen to have, let's take a minor problem of the vehicle, you might correct it even in a very short time. But you were still graded on the effort that it took. Now, let's say that it was a very minor problem, and therefore you didn't exert much effort because you could cover the problem up. Good grade or bad grade? Bad grade. You follow what we're saying? Because maximum effort is your task on every single weakness that you can become aware of with the vehicle. So if it's a little weakness, you still have to apply maximum effort, hoping that you can get it corrected very, very quickly. You don't want to anything left. You don't want to overlook it. You want to try to correct it. But let's say that it's a major weakness that even though you don't want to think it's impossible to correct, because the human vehicle has a characteristic of if it thinks it's impossible to correct, why work so hard on it? You see? Because, and if you let the vehicle think that, then you're not going to do your 100% effort. So the only way you can force the vehicle to stay in line in order that your mind might apply the effort that it is its task to apply, you have to believe and convince that vehicle it is accomplishable. Now, if at the end of your task you gave 100% effort in accomplishing the control and change of all those weak areas, I forgot how I started that sentence. Let's say it's the end of your task and you applied full effort, but certain weak areas or primitive areas are still not corrected. Let's say they're very obvious, something you can see easily. Like we mentioned Branody's difficulty with her vehicle. That is a handicap. That is a genetic difficulty with that vehicle. Now her task is to apply 100% of her next level mind in how she is to look at that, how she is to not let it interfere with her, how she is to keep a positive effort toward correcting it, how she is to be determined that it does not have to be an interference, it is improving, it is, I can get this under better control by doing this, I'm not going to let it change my moods, I'm not going to worry about what others say about whether or not it takes me too long to get in from the car, I'm not going to be concerned about what they say. All I'm concerned about is I hope I'm making a good grade with the next level on applying 100% effort to correct this deficiency in this vehicle. Now, what is totally unimportant, I'm repeating, what is totally unimportant is how much correction is actually made in the object that is the tool of your correction. Because that's not what you're graded on. You're graded on the amount of effort that you applied to correct that deficiency. And that is what does the most good for also the message that you're sending out for others who have that same problem to deal with. But the only reason you don't want to think about it, it's unimportant whether or not the end result is perfect correction, is because the human brain will then try to intercede at its primitive level and say, well, if this looks like I can't reach the accomplished stage of completely licking this problem, then why am I working so hard? It would almost be better if none of you stood a chance of correcting any of those things, and you were graded on, because then you wouldn't be disappointed if it wasn't corrected, if you knew that it could not be corrected. Do you see what we're saying? But that your task was the application of the effort to correct it. Can you follow that? Does that make sense to you?
Well,
Okay.
if you know that the effort that you're exerting is effective, that alone ought to be beneficial.
It's effective for the task that you're doing.
No matter what you do.
Do you really care ultimately whether the vehicle that you're wearing ends up without those difficulties? No. It's not going to serve anybody. That vehicle is going to be thrown in the garbage one day. Really? Right? So do you care? No, what you care is what you are programming out there as you work against that vehicle, as you work to overcome that vehicle's deficiencies and primitive ways. Right? So you don't really care what the end result is. Now, but don't look at that wrong now. Don't look at it as a human would and say, well, then why am I going to try? Because that's the way a human thinks. A human says that, like an old man who's so getting so many ailments that he finally just says, well, why don't I just accept that I'm an old man, loaded down with all these ailments, and I'm just not going to push against it any longer. I'll just let it close in on me. At that point, that you should ever, on any single deficiency your vehicle has, if you take that attitude, you've made an F on that effort. Because yours was not to, your task was to work against it for as long as you're here. To work against it. Because your task is what you're sending out there for others to pick up on. Right? And so, goodness, I wish I could. Here I feel like the frustration that Janody feels at times. I feel like I've got a picture that I'd give anything if I could just transfer a la floppy diskette or whatever it is into your computers and have you receive the picture as complete as I see it. Okay. Stanley asked a question about we're going to have to, we've got something we've got to do, we're going to have to call it quits, about his list of his program for his task and worrying about the wording of it. And we just brought up that probably from now until you leave, whether or not you turn it into links is going to be whether or not we get the whether or not we give you instruction or we get the instruction to have you continue to turn them into links. But your job is to see those things more and more from the vantage point of your next level mind. as deficiencies and weaknesses or undeveloped areas of a vehicle, relative to the prize vehicle, which is one that has become perfectly healthy and void of all primitive ways. So you will be improving and changing your list, but for now, you send us one, and if in a week or so you think you've got one that you've brought more mind in, and you can see it from a higher vantage point, then you can send it to us again, and we'll throw them away, and see how much more mind you have forced in order to see it. One thing that's funny to me, when Jan Odie was talking about this confusion that comes in, the difficulty of getting a thought carried and getting it out. The task you're on in itself brings that difficulty to all of you, to your teachers and to every member of your class, even if your vehicle relatively had no difficulty with clear picture and clear expression. Now, believe it or not, there's not a human vehicle on the face of the earth from next level standards that has even 50% clear picture and clear expression. So you're only comparing one with another. You see what we're saying? And your task, since you're coming into a primitive vehicle, that even what other primitive vehicles would consider A plus clear picture and clear expression, you're coming in and merely by the presence of your next level mind in that brain and attempting to speak through that brain next level thought does all kinds of short circuiting on clear picture and clear expression. This is why we and you've got to learn how to get used to that problem and try to change its program. Because the best program it could possibly have is not good enough to take. It's like a computer that can't handle a program. Your next level mind way of thinking, you don't have a computer that can handle it. So what you've got to learn is the trick of how to get it through it, even though it isn't built to handle it. You see what we're saying? Now this, years ago, we used to translate as how our minds affected our vehicles. Do you remember? And how it caused us difficulty in speech? Well, the same thing is happening with you. If you're having no difficulty with speech, it's because you're thinking too low. Or you're expressing yourself too low. One or the other, or both. Because if you're letting next level thought be expressed, you have all kinds of short circuits happening automatically in a primitive brain. And your job is, can I get them through there, learn the tricks of jerry-rigging my brain so that I can come out with next level expression of thought.
But in the process of doing that, you're helping the little humans, the plants outside, to get in control of their vehicle. Because
at a much higher level.
They too can get in control of their brains and their sensations.
That's right. You can't imagine how what you're doing, what accelerating favor it is doing for the human planet. I mean, the chief is blessing them with miracle growth during your presence. I'm not kidding. With a potent, long-term dose of miracle growth during your presence.